Hi, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of From the Heart. I'm so excited. I have my friend Haley Cordova on. She's very requested. When I say you guys, like over probably 80% of you guys were begging to have her on. And I was like, oh my goodness, why have I never had you on before? So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, of course. Thank you I can't even explain how excited I am right now. This is like a dream. Thank you so much.
No, I'm so excited. I will get into it, but I've been following you for a while. I'm a fan of you. So this is going to be such a fun conversation. I love it. But for all of the listeners who maybe don't know, you do want to give like a brief description, a little intro on you yourself.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Haley Cordova. I am 21. I grew up in Virginia in a very small little rural town moment. I basically on social media, I have like a fitness TikTok that I have. I have like a fitness Instagram and things like that. Basically all about gym and wellness and overall kind of my journey in food and like healthy perspectives and things like that that I post. And I make a lot of like fitness kind of wellness content that even just sounds way cooler than I feel like it is or like looks half the time. But really just my hope is to encourage people to really focus on the relationship with themselves and with like the world around them kind of thing. But yeah, I'm so excited. It's such a pleasure and I'm so grateful for this opportunity, seriously.
I'm so grateful to have you on, seriously. Okay, so social media, that's how I found you. You came up on my For You page on TikTok like so many times. We'll get into it, but you're like Bites for Balance series. I loved
Yes.
it. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I got more into like your What I Eat a Days. And then I was watching a lot of like you just like sit down and chat. And I love that. Like I'm a big chatter and you just gave
Right.
such good insight. I was like, that's a word. That's a word. I'm like, this girl's so insightful and you have so much depth into like your content. I love it. And it always just like you're so well spoken. Like whatever you like will say, literally any topic. It's just like I'm like I needed to hear that, or I'm like I know someone needed to hear that. You're very authentic and raw, and I just love that. And I know from being like a person on social media myself, I know how hard that can be to be vulnerable at first, especially a lot of the topics you talk about are very like personal. Um,
Yeah.
so one, props to you, and thank you for
Thank
having
you.
that light on the internet because people need that for sure. You're helping so many people. But I'm curious, what kind of like led you to start posting on social media? Because I feel like, I mean, not everyone, I mean, there's a start, I guess, essentially for everyone. What was yours?
Yeah. So especially growing up, I grew up loving social media in terms of like YouTube. That was the
Mhm.
main kind of when I was growing up in like in high school, I would watch, like Emma Chamberlain, you have like Sarah Baska. I don't know if you know who that is. She's like one of my favorite YouTubers, Sarah Baska, like Jenna Marbles, all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
where overall just content, I was always consuming it. And this idea of being a I never ever would have associated myself
Yeah.
with that, but it was always something that was so cool to me. And I never saw it for myself, but it was kind of like in the back of my mind of like, oh, that's like a dream job, to like record yourself or to make little videos. Like I thought that was so cool, but I never ever would have thought that I would even know how to do that
Mhm.
because usually, especially with YouTube focused, it's like they have cameras and they have mics and all this stuff. And I've never been much of a tech girl,
Same, same. No,
literally.
I
So
totally can like agree and relate to that because for me, again, like I would always watch people as well. And I'm like, that just like could I was shy. I hated the camera. I'm like, don't I
right.
take photos and I didn't like my voice on an audio. And I was like, that's just not for me. And then
Yeah.
look at us now. That's so
It's
crazy.
crazy how life works. And so growing up, I thought that was so cool. Never would have seen it for myself. And then in terms of with me and my friends, all of my friends, after we had graduated, they all went off to 4 year,
Yeah.
like university. And bunch of stuff with my life didn't end up working out for me that way. And so when I graduated, I ended up going to community college. And so I'm incredibly grateful when I think retrospectively to that time because I went into it kind of ashamed of it because people talk about community college like it's like a dumb. Anytime that I would describe it to someone's parents, oh yeah, I'm going to like, this community college, it would always be this weird, like, aw, or that's so smart. You're so smart for
Yeah.
doing that.
They
And a
like
part of me is
degraded a
kind of like,
bit.
yeah,
I
I'm like,
no, I went to community college in the first 2 years as well. It was like the best decision ever. I'm like, I wish I could have stayed in it all 4 years. I'm like, I hated my
same.
school. I loved my community college.
Yeah, same. So going that way, it wasn't isolating specifically. I mean,
Mhm.
I still like went and would visit my friends at their schools like for
Yeah.
holidays or whatever, or like especially like having the communication online is helpful because we keep in touch. But in terms of day to day, I mean, I'm sure especially from doing it yourself, like you are kind of alone all the time. And so that's when I really started getting into the gym too, is after I graduated. And it was the only thing that I had with myself, and I had so much to say and like thoughts, and I felt like I was learning so much.
Mm.
But I was the only one in my friend group that really did the gym like
Yeah.
that, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah. Same.
everybody likes to say like they're a wellness or whatever, but really took it seriously.
Mhm.
So I kind of reached a point where I had so many thoughts in my
Yeah.
head that I was like, I need to put this somewhere before I actually go clinically insane.
I love
So yeah, it was a crazy thing because I was, especially with where I've grown up from,
it.
it's embarrassing to start social media. It's a weird, everybody knows each other, and it's kind of like
Oh.
that feeling, like you think that everybody is instigative of like
Mhm.
what you're up to,
Mhm.
which first of all, we're just not that important, like in a big, you know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like
It's
everybody's
not
like
that
looking at
serious ever. Yeah.
literally. So I was really embarrassed about starting, but I had thought about it for so long, and I had gotten to a point where I literally felt like I couldn't keep it to myself anymore because I would consume so much media about it, and that becomes like your whole life.
Yeah.
And day to day, it was all that I really had, like when I wasn't with my friends. So I was like, you know what, whatever. And interestingly enough, my like sign, I don't even know how I feel about like
Mm.
manifestation, like if that stuff's real or not, but my family got Chinese takeout. I've always thought my lucky number is 2.
Yeah.
I don't know if do you have a lucky number?
Mine's 5. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like
Yep.
everybody has a number that they
Yes.
kind of resonate with.
Yep.
Mine is because like my birthday, it's like 12/22, 2002, and I'm the second
Oh,
kid. So I've always been like a 2 girl.
yeah.
And there were 2 fortune cookies left in the Chinese takeout, like they
Mhm.
had extras. And I opened both of them. This was at the time that I was really, really considering starting social media, but it was just,
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know anything about it. And I literally wrote down the 2 fortunes that I had. One of them said, for success today, look first to yourself. And then the other one said, now is the time to be candid and above board in all things. And I was like, okay, that's like
That's
weird.
crazy.
I thought that was weird. So I was like, you
That's
know
so
what?
true.
This is my sign to like just start it and just to do something that's so scary and so unfamiliar to me. And that's what kind of led me to initially beginning it, but it was still really like nerve-wracking, and nobody from my friends from my high school does stuff like that. So I blocked everybody that I could think of, literally, and like their parents, like everybody. And I was like, I'm just gonna see what I can do here. And that's kind of how that started.
I love it. I love it because it is scary. And I'm glad like you can say that because I feel like everyone in like everyone who isn't on social media already probably feels the exact same way. That's exactly how I felt. Like I waited until the end of high school. I was like, okay, now I'm at a high school. I don't have to face all of these friends and these
Right.
people that I know every day. And so then I was like, screw it. Like I'll start posting my face and talking on my channel and stuff because I would only post like food. Like no one knew it was me.
Yeah.
Like not even Chloe's name. It was some random username.
Uh-huh.
So like, but once you start, it's like you get such a good response. I don't know if like people started finding your page from like your town and stuff, but I had the experience of I'd be at like a basketball game or I would just be somewhere like out and about in my town and people would be like, I love this recipe or I like I saw this and I was like, wait, it was such a positive response. And I was like,
Yeah.
what was I so scared about? Like it's
Right.
such a beneficial thing for others and myself that I was like, okay, everything I feared, like none of that actually happened and it was all for the better. So
Yeah, and that's I totally understand, and that feeling of not putting your face in it, not putting your name in it. When I started my account, I was not my name wasn't it was C-Bum's biggest fan. If real ones remember that, because I
that's
waited until
hilarious.
I kind of changed my name because it was scary.
Yeah,
And I think it's a huge thing when you realize it's positively accepted, but you don't know that kind of thing until you try. And it totally is scary, but I feel like, I mean, we'll get into it, but that's one of the main things that I've learned is like whatever feels scary and as hard is usually like what you need to do.
exactly.
It's
I
crazy.
always say that too. I'm like, change is always uncomfortable and it's always going to be scary because it's like uncharted territory. But like that's the only way you can grow. I feel like you can't grow doing the same thing. So you need to try new things. And that's something for me too. Like I was a big fan of my comfort zone for a long, long time. And then the more I step out of it, like the more benefit I get and the more growth I make. And I'm like, okay, there's clearly like a correlation between the two. So I'm proud of you for starting because I know
Thanks.
how scary it is, but I'm so glad you're on socials. So talking about your socials, like I said earlier, two of the series that really pulled me into your channel that I found was your
Mhm.
Bites for Balance series and your What I Eat in a Days. So what kind of inspired you to share the Bites for Balance? Because I love that and I've never seen anyone like post something like that. And you were so like right
Really?
with it too. I was like, that's really inspiring because I know fear foods are a huge thing for people. And I guess I kind of want to give a disclaimer because I think we're going to talk about like trigger warning for some
We
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should probably put this in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Disclaimer, guys, we're probably gonna be talking about eating disorders and just like the mindset behind all of that. So if that's triggering to any of you, this is your warning. This is like hop off if that's gonna
Yeah.
stem or trigger anything negative. But honestly, this is all for the benefit and to share your experience and help others listening. So hopefully we can do that. But anyway, back to what we were saying. What kind of inspired the Bites for Balance? Because I loved that. And do you still do that or are
I
you
do.
okay, okay. That's what I
I
thought.
do, yeah. So interestingly enough, with all of that, the idea for that had sprouted, if you will, when I was in a really dark time for me, just because, and I guess when we talk about more just like overall, like
Yeah.
what my journey looks like, whatever, that makes it sound so much cooler than it is. I'm not a superhero, but when I was in like kind of that struggle period where I had really, really dialed in for quite literally no reason on like health and exercise,
Yeah.
and I was treating my life like prep for
Mhm.
no reason, literally no reason. Nobody made me do that, but for some reason I got really into it. I remember I had just come home from vacation with my friends, and that was kind of, and it makes me sad because there's such a societal pressure for like vacations to like lose weight for vacation, you know, like summer
In-
cut, like whatever. Everybody always talks about that, which I think also might have played a role into why I treated it as severe as I did or whatever. But after that vacation, I think I just expected it to be like, okay, we went on vacation, we had our moment, like now we can live back to normal, you
Yeah.
know, or go back to how it was. And it was this realization that, oh, some of the things I'm still struggling with, even without that kind of, I don't want to say deadline, but that pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was literally, I remember I was at the gym and I was on the stairs, and I don't recall if I was just thinking it to myself or if I was watching somebody else eat something that I was like, oh dang. But I just remember thinking to myself, like, I wish I could have like so many foods. Like there were so many foods that I was thinking of in my head that I was like, in a perfect world, like I can't wait to eat that. Like
Yeah.
whenever I heal or whenever I get past this period, like I
Mhm.
can't wait to have that. Which now makes me sad, right? Because it's like I was living my life at the time with this imaginary like rule book of like
Yeah.
what I can and can't eat
Mhm.
for no reason, and I was letting that dictate, you know, my decisions. But
Yeah.
I went in my notes app and I was literally just sitting there listing just foods. And I didn't even think that I was going to do like a series on it, but it was just something that was in my notes app. And I saw a video of a girl who did something similar. I don't remember who it was. It wasn't like a for like the a bites for balance moment, but it was
Mhm.
similar like trying a challenge. I think it was something
Yeah.
she had struggled with like social anxiety, and
Mhm.
it was like behaviors. Like I think the one that I saw, if I can remember correctly, it was like eating by yourself, like out, you
Wait, I
know?
think I know what you're talking about. I think I saw or something similar. Like it was a girl
Yeah.
doing uncomfortable things kind of every single day of
Mhm.
like social, it was like a social experiment or something. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just that idea of purposefully
Mhm.
challenging yourself, but doing it in a way that kind of holds you accountable. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay. And so I kind of sat with that for a little bit. And as summer kind of progressed and things, I was still struggling with it. And I was like, you know what? I need to embark change somehow. And at that point, I'd had my TikTok for like 6 months or so because I started in like December of 2022. So I had a little bit of a following, and I was like, terrified
Yeah.
because I was afraid of what that would do or what that would say about me, or you know, a lot of these negative stigmas that I held within myself about like struggling with things like that, right? Like you think it's embarrassing and whatever made up thing that's just
Yeah.
not true. But I was like, you know what, I need to do this for myself. So I wrote all of them down, I cut them out on index cards, and I put them in a jar, and I just made a video about it. And also I did see somebody say that just to grow on social media, something that really helps people is like consistency or being on some kind of journey
Hmm.
is something that helps. And I was like, okay, well, this can be something that holds me accountable to do it
Yeah.
regularly. Like I do it once a week, but then also like it provides a space for other people to come and say, okay, well, I actually also struggle eating that, you know, and like watching somebody do that can be comforting. And also like I try to kind of give some general advice. I'm not like Gandhi, but I try to be as, you know, mindful as I can about that audience as well, and just talking about it. So that's how that kind of started. And then through that, it did, a lot of people did really like it. And so sometimes other people comment theirs. And so I'll do
Yeah.
theirs too. And it's like a very positive thing. And it's been really, really beautiful and also very helpful to me
Hmm.
because not only does it keep me consistent with it, yeah, sure, but it just reminds me of how I think when you struggle with anything, like outside of food, gym, like anything, you think that you're literally the only person.
Yeah.
And the second you make an uncomfortable step of sharing it, you realize how not alone you are. And that has been such a crazy, like the most specific, weird things that you
Yes.
think are like not anything, somebody like, I totally understand. And that's such a validating thing.
Yeah.
And it keeps me going and also can encourage others to like do a similar kind of moment. You know what I mean?
Mhm. No, I love that. I'm the same way. I'm like, people are always like, I don't have original thoughts, but it's like so true. Cause I'm like, I will see things and even things you've said, I'm like, whoa, like I totally relate to that. Or like, okay, I'm not the only one who thinks like that. And it is very comforting because it's like, if she can heal, so can I. Or it's like inspiring.
Right.
It's like, okay, we're going through the same thing and she's on her healing journey. I can too. And so I feel like it's such a win-win. Like it's helping you, it's helping your like community, it's building that community. Yeah, I love that series. It's
Thank
like one of my
you.
favorite on TikTok, seriously, because it's so helpful and it's so honest and raw and authentic. And it's obviously like a hard series, but it's good for you in that way. Like you're doing it to
Mhm.
benefit and you're doing it to challenge yourself and hold yourself accountable. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot to it. Like there's a lot of depth to that challenge that I really respect.
Thank you
Um,
so much. I
and
really appreciate
then
that.
yeah, of course. So again, another one that I love of yours is like what I eat in a day. So you post those pretty much every day, I think, right?
I
Or
try to.
yeah, yeah, and I love it. I actually there's a lot of food that you make, and I'm like, "Ooh," I feel like we have very similar taste buds because you'll make
Yeah.
together. I'm like, no, I know that's good. Like you made a wrap and you put like refried beans on it. I ate
Yes.
that for like 2 months straight. I'm
I
like,
saw
I was
your video on it
hyper
too.
fixated. I was like, you guys, like this is so good. I get it.
Beans.
Like, and your sweet potato, what every
Hell
morning,
yeah.
that's my favorite. Like I always put
Yes.
honey on mine and oh, so good. But I was curious. I guess we're gonna jump down really quick to like your
Yeah.
like eating and training. So because this kind of goes with this question, but right now,
Totally.
are you eating like do you track or are you eating intuitively or what's like your eating looking
Yeah.
like right now?
So for my whole fitness journey, if you will, I've been lifting technically since about 2020, so about 4 years, but I only started tracking my food at from like 2022 onward. So I've only been tracking for about 2 years, but I was doing it pretty religiously.
Yeah.
And it's only been recently that I've kind of switched to intuitive eating. I never thought that that would be something that would work for me just because growing up I've always been a huge eater to where like of course
Yeah.
you think, oh well, that just means that I'm going to eat everything ever, right? Or I also had fitness goals and I didn't know how to accomplish them without tracking. And I do just want to say tracking is an amazing tool. It's
Yeah.
something that I suggest for a lot of like the clients that I have of like it can be a great thing and just getting educated on what the macros are, like what they do for you kind of thing. But so for 2 years, I was tracking, but I'm at a phase right now where I haven't tracked the past few months. And it's been really, really interesting
Mm-hmm.
because it's, I guess when I talk about it, it sounds like, oh, like, okay, you've been doing it for 2 years and now you're not doing it. But I genuinely was somebody who I thought that you could not see progress if you didn't
Yeah.
track.
Yeah.
You know
A
what I
lot
mean?
of people
So,
come to me because I eat intuitively for the most part.
mhm,
Like I always kind of have. And people always ask about that. They're like, how do you see results? Like, how do you do it? So I'm glad to hear from someone who has tracked and who now is eating intuitively that it is a helpful tool. And I always say that. But for me, it was like like it was too much. Like that's what
yeah,
to my like unhealthy relationship with food because it was like too much. I had to be too perfect. And I'm not a perfectionist. Like I'm kind of like a on a whim person. So for me to have to calculate everything, I would be, and I like to like, when I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right though. And so
period.
like, mixed or messed up like my macros, like I felt so bad about myself that day and it felt like a failure. And so for me, I was like, I can't have that mindset with tracking.
Yeah.
So I had to like cut out, like I had to remove myself from it and just go intuitively. And I'm like, hey, that's what works best for me. But from you, I love that you can do both and you've been able to like transition into that.
Yeah, thank you. How did you realize that it was something that was like negatively impacting you? Because I think a lot of people struggle with it's like, yeah, this kind of stresses me out, but it also helps me for my goals. And it's like things can coexist, but it's really muddy waters of
Yeah.
treading like when it's helpful and when it's kind of harmful. So what was like your biggest turning point from going from tracking to intuitive eating?
So for me, it was all the days that I felt guilty for missing my macros. If I like had a weird day, I'm like, I don't want to have
Yeah.
this guilt. Like I never had guilt about it before because I'm a big foodie. I'm like a big eater. I've never been like super cut and lean, but I've never like needed to be essentially. And like
Right.
I've always been more every time I would track too would be to like cut. It was never
Yeah.
to maintain, it was never to bulk, it was never really beneficial. It was always because I felt like I needed to cut. And so I already had like a negative, perspective on it because it was like
Mhm.
I do this and then I get to a certain point and then I was never getting to that point. Like I was never getting lean, like there was always more to give. And I was like, okay, there's
Yeah.
gonna be an end to this. And two people would always ask about a bulking phase. I'm like, it was too much. It was too restrictive on like both ends. And I was like, my life is just so this and that. And like I'll travel and it's just like it wasn't realistic and maintainable for me.
Mhm.
I'm big on like do what's longevity. Like
Right.
I can't track macros forever. So I'm like, if I can't figure it out now, like, or I have to figure it out now. Like I have to learn how to eat intuitively because I don't want to like rely on this scale forever. And so for me, it was just I was having too many nights of feeling guilty about missing my macros, either going over or under. And I was like, dang, like how can I not do it? And then I
Yeah.
was like, hey, Chloe, maybe that's a sign that's just like not for you because then I would get off macros and I was thinking about food less because I wasn't tracking and it wasn't like, oh, dang, I'm way ahead for the day. It's only noon. Like I only have 800 calories left, or it's noon and I have to eat 2,000 more calories. Like, how
Yeah.
do it?
Right.
Like, it was just consuming my thoughts at all times. So when I knew I could intuitively eat and listen to my body, it just took off like pressure. And I feel like it helped me just with my relationship with food. But
Totally.
I was listening to your one podcast about like it was like your first ever.
Oh,
Podcast.
I sound like a
I loved it.
baby. I sound like a baby in that.
No, when I look back at my old content, I look different, I sound different, I act different. I'm like, oh Lord. But I loved it. I thought you did great.
Thanks.
But you were saying, what was I just thinking? It's something about tracking. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought.
You're so good.
Let me
Well,
you
while you think about that, I
yeah,
was gonna just say I would like to tell you that it's very admirable that you had the discernment about that you did, because a lot of people, they don't recognize that, or they wait until it becomes over
yeah.
consuming before they have that honest conversation with themselves, which
Mhm.
I think is really, really important. And one of the things that is even in like my Bites for Balance things that I try to talk about is getting introspective and asking yourself like why you do certain things. And half the reason I share is because you can't fix things, or not fix to imply that it's like broken, but you can't work on things and work alongside yourself if you don't know that what you're doing is negative, or to challenge the thoughts you have. So like to hear somebody else say something that they struggle with food and you wouldn't have even known that that's something that maybe isn't normal,
Yeah.
right? Or like for you, like to feel the contrast of the days that you didn't track and be like, oh, I feel a lot better. Like you don't know to challenge those things unless you're brought aware of them. And that's really hard to do when you're by yourself. So I
Yeah.
just want to say, I hope that you're proud of yourself for that, because
Thank
that
you.
takes a lot of discernment that a lot of people don't have. I don't know if that helped you with your thought that you were thinking of, but
No,
that I
it
just
did. It
wanted
came back to me.
to.
It came back to me. Because one thing too that I feel like it at the same time as like me dabbling with macros and stuff, because I've been on my fitness journey for a while,
Yeah.
for like since probably high school. I've been out of high school
Yeah.
5 or 6 years of like
Okay.
understanding, and I got my CPT and I like was taking nutrition courses. And you mentioned like the more you learn, honestly, it's like harder. Like sometimes you're too hyper aware, and I feel like that was
Yeah.
another thing I was struggling with because I was learning about macros, and it's almost like you have like a filter, like a certain lens you view
Oh
food.
yeah.
Like you can look at a piece of chicken and be like, hey, that's 20 grams of protein. Like you know exactly what you're gonna eat without even count. Like you have to like actually subconscious or like consciously stop yourself from tracking. Like I can look at food and be like, okay, boom, 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 boom. And I was doing that like every single time. And I'm like, I don't even want to do that. So I would literally
Yeah.
have to stop myself and like talk myself through it and force myself to not track that meal mentally. Because I think it's good to have like a gauge of portions and be able to
Totally.
like, okay, that's about a serving of carbs, that's about a serving of protein. Cause I like to eat balanced meals. But it was to the point when I was tracking and then right off, one of the struggles I had was like I wasn't weighing food out, but I was still like mentally being like, okay, that's about
Yeah.
this, that's about this. And I know you mentioned something about that. Sorry.
You're good.
But how did you, because I think you mentioned something about kind of experiencing something similar or like just having knowledge and it almost being not harmful, but like I guess
Yeah.
uncomfortable to face.
Totally. I think that education I guess it's two things at one time. It can be a multifaceted moment, but
Yeah.
it can be very harmful in the sense that when you're too aware, like you had said, everything becomes a kind of a guessing game.
Yeah.
And that can be, again, if you don't have that discernment or you don't have that foundation or anyone to keep you in check, that can be something where it's like you might not be logging it in an app, but you're still mentally logging it, and that's still negatively impacting your mental health kind of thing.
Yeah.
And But for me, one thing I found that I also thought was helpful is education also kind of helped me because when I was restricted with my food for a small period of time, I was in kind of a victim mindset of like, what is that going to do to me? Like, what is that going to do to me? I can't eat that. But the more educated that I got, it was like really reframing that to what food does for me. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, while maybe I'm looking at chicken breasts and I could probably tell you how many calories, how much food while yes, knowing that can
Mhm.
suck sometimes, and sometimes, like especially like when you go out to eat at a restaurant, it's like a love-hate relationship when they have the calories next to it. I'm like,
Yes, I
thank
know,
you, but like I'd rather just
but like,
not.
no thanks.
Right. So it's like while you have that knowledge,
Mhm.
I think the growth for me has been not letting the knowledge dictate what I do moving forward. So like let's just say I don't mean to like hyperfixate on numbers, but let's just say that I go out to eat and there's like 1,000 calorie pasta dish. Okay, knowing that it's 1,000 calories is one thing, but eating that and knowing what that can do for you is
Yeah.
another. And that's how I feel like I kind of combine that hyper awareness with
Mhm.
just overall nutrition of,
Mhm.
okay, yes, this, maybe this meal has a lot of fat in it. So what does that mean? That means that I probably shouldn't train right after it, but that doesn't have any impact on who I
Yeah,
am morally, on
yeah,
like what I have to do the rest of the day. Like that's just looking at the facts for what they are and kind of removing the emotional piece to
yeah,
it. Because what I've noticed, at least with myself, there is so much more psychology and emotional things that go into like diet and exercise than just the diet and exercise that I feel like people don't, which is one of half the things that I just yap about all the time because I feel like nobody would talk about how you
yeah,
play games with yourself or like you
yeah,
can really it's such a crazy thing and I feel like that's also some of the reason I share what I do and I feel more comfortable even when I feel like it doesn't make sense is because it's like it's such I don't want to say it's a battle with yourself. I like to look at it as like working alongside yourself kind of
yeah,
thing. But the more that I've gone through my own kind of stuff, the more that I've been able to use things like knowledge or intuitive eating and like just trying to find the best way for me to still be mindful paired alongside like not letting it take over. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that how you can reframe, like you said, the knowledge and stuff because that's huge. So reframe, that's big. Like that's a big thing
Yes.
people can honestly incorporate into like a lot of different parts of their life too. It's like you can have the good and the bad, and it's like all bad things can be made good. So it's pretty much just the perspective of your mindset. And like you said, there's so much psychology into this stuff,
Oh
and
my
it
God.
is crazy. Like it's I always say like training for me and like even doing like a hard run, it's 90% mental. And same
Mm-hmm.
with cooking, like it's not physically hard to eat a meal. It's not physically hard to cook a meal, but like the mental side of it is where it gets tricky for people. If they're like, I don't know, I feel like you can even like convince yourself you're like if they're bulking, it's like, oh, I'm so full. Yeah, it's just like you always want what
It's
you can't have,
totally.
you know? Like if you're bulking, you
Absolutely.
probably never want to eat. And when you're cutting, you always want to eat. So it really is just so it's so psychological. And I love that you talk about that because I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about that. People are like mind over matter, just like be tough. But like
Yeah.
it's still like a hard conversation to have with yourself. And yeah, I love that. Now I kind of want to chat about your experience with like healing your relationship with diet and exercise. So did you struggle with like both diet and exercise or more so diet?
So it was kind of a combination of both. I grew up in soccer my whole life. I played travel sports and I stopped playing that mainly because like of mental health stuff. And then also kind of simultaneously COVID happened.
Mhm.
So I was sort of forced to, for the first time ever, not be doing some kind of activity moment. And that's when I started going to the gym was just because I needed some kind of activity. My mom could recognize I was also going through like just a bunch of stuff where like drinking, smoking, like not caring about my health at
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
and I needed some kind of movement and outlet. So that's why I started going to the gym in 2020. And it initially was more just like for fun. And I knew I needed movement. I mean, like as an athlete, it's pretty much like your whole life. It's a very weird transitional period. So I fell in love with the process there. I think, interestingly enough, right after our like intuitive eating conversation, I think when I got my food scale in 2022 is when I really started to get serious about it. I started the 75 hard in 2022. Like that was when I think it's always been big, but
Mhm.
that's when it was all over the place
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
this is what's gonna fix all your problems. And I was like, okay. I had been doing my Chloe Ting like booty
Yeah.
bands and it wasn't working. So I was like, all right,
It's
shit, I'll try this.
yeah.
And so with that, that was when I bought my first food scale. And it was not a negative thing at all. It was actually very exciting. I
Yeah.
remember it was actually fun looking at like, okay, let me track this. Okay, that has that
Yeah.
many carbs. Okay, like and looking at it more in that innocence kind
Yes,
of
for
way
sure.
of like, okay, like I even remember at that period, it was like the Rice Krispie treats is like the pre-workout, you
Yeah.
know, and like
Yeah.
learning about, okay, sugar is helping me to do this. And like, it was really a very innocent thing. And it was that for a while. I
Mhm.
think when I started to struggle with it was going into 2023. So I used my food scale to as a tool to help me. It wasn't like a weapon to restrict me or anything like that. I used it when I was bulking too. And
Mhm.
I just want to add terms like bulking and cutting for me. I'm trying to refrain from using them because I was viewing my life literally as like
Yeah.
summer is cutting season, winter is bulking season. And like I am not personally, I don't think competing. So
Yeah.
there's no need to view it that
Right.
way.
Right.
But for whatever, I used it during my bulk, okay, and it was very helpful just to make sure that I was eating enough to grow because I really wanted to get serious about all of that kind of stuff. But going into after my first serious like growing season, if you will,
Mhm.
that's when I had also started social media. I had those vacations. I was also just going through like personal, like whatever hot mess things and figuring myself out. And I think just overall stress, I tried to cut in a way of like just slowly decreasing my food. But then I think I felt a little bit of pressure around because the gym at that point had become sort of my identity of like my friends saw that as my cute little hobby sort of thing. It was something that I was literally doing all the time. And then I also had social media that showcased my love for it. And while I'm grateful for all of those things and all of those kind of like identity pieces, I think I hadn't really seen results yet. I didn't feel like I looked like I lifted. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like I looked strong or that it's kind of it's a shitty part of a lot of social media stuff where your body in a certain degree does serve as a credential in a very unfortunate way to
Agree.
where I was like, I feel like I talk about the gym and stuff and nobody actually believes me sort of thing. So it was sort of this like, yeah, like money bag, yo, me versus me moment. But also I think I just felt pressure. And
Mhm.
so it created a lot of stress to lean out for summer.
Yeah.
So slowly I guess it was just a combination of both, but it was just like I put myself, I had mentioned earlier, like through prep.
Hmm.
That was what because I was so gym content
Yeah.
absorbed at the time, that's what I thought that's how you cut is like just by going to a show. Like that's all
Yeah.
that I thought that it was. So, and I gave my past self a lot of grace because I think that that's all that I knew and I did the best that I could and I didn't obviously have a coach. And there's a reason that for processes like that you have a coach
Yeah.
because
For
those
sure.
things are number one not meant to be sustainable.
Yeah.
They are for specific day, right? And they are with a lot of very specific things to make sure that while yes, like you probably will have to make some like health sacrifices, you reverse right after. Like it's very there's a word I'm looking for that I don't want to say controlled, but it's like it's under supervision in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so going about a process like that on my own, the difference there is I was doing that just to look good and
Mhm.
like just to like have pictures for vacation.
Yeah.
And so what's not great about that, and when you are by yourself, is you don't have anybody to keep you accountable. And also, I was living a lifestyle at the time that like very prep mirrored
Mhm.
that is I was like digging my claws trying to keep as a sustainable thing. And that lifestyle is literally made to be reversed. It is not made to be prolonged. So it was tough for me because I reached my goals. I did get, I mean, very lean and I felt great, not like body wise. I mean, there's a whole other health loose slur of like awful things that come alongside all of that. But in terms of like how I looked, I was very content with it.
Yeah.
But because of the negative impacts that it had on my health and my mental health and all of that, I had to come to terms with the fact that like I can't have the personal aesthetic goals that I want alongside a sustainable lifestyle. And it
Mhm.
was this battle sort of thing of like having to kind of reverse out of that. And doing that on my own was really difficult because
Sure.
when you don't have anybody to check you, it's like you kind of see how much you can get away with.
Yeah.
But also, external things like relationships, like things that I think of as like this is what matters in my life of, going to weddings or
Yeah.
lunch with friends, those things become threats to your identity when you are solely focused on like looking or appearing a certain way. So I
Absolutely.
think it was a combination of both for me. And it had just gotten to a point where, my health was starting to be a concern as well. And then I noticed my relationships were not what they needed to be either. You know, I was being, it makes you bitchy, like
Yeah.
literally being
Yeah.
super lean, you're an asshole. Like, I don't know if you hear this.
No, even when I don't eat enough during the day, I'm like, I get hangry. Like that's real. And I'm like explaining to my boyfriend, I'm like, no, like I just need food. Like I don't I don't really know the science behind it.
Literally.
I mean, it's just like your body, I guess, puts energy elsewhere other than me being happy. Like yeah, no, I get it. Like, and everyone on prep is, yeah, always like, I'm so mean and so crabby and so cranky. So
Totally.
that's why I'm like, I get like, I hate that. Like that mood drop when I'm hungry is like the worst ever. It's, oh,
Yeah, and that's one of like living days like that too, in terms of like what kind of led me to start healing and start to change is, well, number one, obviously my health was a concern, and I don't mean at all to imply that you need to wait until your health declines. Like,
right.
don't do that
That
either.
was just kind of your wake up call, would you say?
Right. Because I think because it was like self-inflicted, when you have a, I don't want to say that it was a coping mechanism, perhaps it was. I mean, I try to look at myself and just be like introspective. I don't know, like I don't know either. I did start therapy that summer too, which has helped a ton. I'm very grateful for that
Yeah.
resource. But with all of that, I think I was using it sort of as a coping mechanism. And when you have a coping mechanism, if that thing is causing you negative effects, you're gonna do your best to blame everything else besides the one. Like if somebody was looking at me through a telescope or something, they'd be like, "Girl, that's the thing."
That's
You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely.
Like I was looking at like relationships and saying, "Well, this is why I'm in a bad mood," or like, "Well, this is why I'm doing this. Let me go on the stairs for an hour." And I was like, "Girl, maybe that's why. Like, let's have a moment." What is it? That call is coming from inside the house. You know what I mean? Have you ever seen
Yes,
that?
yes,
Like, it's
yes.
just one of those things where I think I was just desperately trying to cling on to something that gave me control. It gave me kind of comfort in my identity, and
Yeah.
it made me feel like I mattered in that way, which it was really unfortunate. And it's why I love that quote. I did not come up with it, but the like your body's the least interesting thing about you kind of thing.
Yes, I love
I,
that too.
it really means a lot to me because with especially with fitness stuff, there is a pressure to appear a certain way to like know what you're talking about, and that can lead people to strive to maintain something that negatively impacts them, and like that's just not the point. So for me, I was living every single day and I was like, I'm not having fun. Like
Yeah.
it's not great. Like I don't know if you've ever been through a situation where like your energy is just like
Yeah.
you're shot, and like it's like you have no desire to do anything, and
Yes.
you still try to do what you've been doing, and it's like you literally can't anymore. Do you know what I
Body's
mean?
just like giving out. No, yeah, I've totally had those days too. And I love that about like your body is the least interesting thing about you. And you saying how like your physique, it is a credential for like the career that we have and that we're in and the industry that we're in and stuff. And that was a hard thing for me that I experienced as well, just being on social media. I mean, it's been however many years, but recently I've been able to make a switch to kind of being more performance based. And that's what
Mm,
led to me becoming more of like a hybrid athlete. And a lot
mm.
of people took like the running as a negative thing because for a long time people like really had like a bad perspective on running. You know, it was like
Yeah,
you're a cardio bunny, like you're just doing it because you want to cut and lean out. And everyone was assuming that at first. But I'm like, that's
right.
actually the opposite reason I'm doing it is because I was putting such an emphasis on my physique that I was like, I want to put more of an emphasis on my ability and like what I can do.
I love that.
Made me fall in love with running because I'm like, one, you have to eat to run. Like you have to feel your body. And it taught me how to like properly like I guess like pre-run and post-run to recover and like eat
Right.
and stuff. And so that was really helpful, but also too like just having more of like a credential other than my physique, but like being like, oh, I used to run a 10-minute pace and now I can run an 8:30 pace and I can run 30
Yeah.
and I never could. And so it's like finding that other kind of vessel within social media or within, I guess, my career was very, very helpful and healing for me because it is so hard when your physique is a direct like correlation to like what you do and how you know because people are always like, well, I would never like hire a trainer who like doesn't look like they know how to work out, but it's like
Right.
beyond that. Like people who are very like educated and they can share and help so much other than how they look. So I'm glad you talked about that because that's a big struggle that I've like
Yeah.
experienced in the industry and I think a lot of others do. And a lot of people think like, oh, I can't start on social media because I don't have like the physique. And like you said, people love a journey. People love to follow a journey, start from start to finish. Everyone starts somewhere. But also too, like really want to emphasize to like everyone listening is like so many other ways to prove your
Mm,
knowledge and your experience based on
mm-hmm.
performance and stuff. And I think I feel like that's why hybrid is such a thing right now, because people love that like gratification of seeing progress, like start to finish,
Totally.
gotta start somewhere. So yeah, anyway, kind of threw you off.
No, totally. And I want to say too, with that, I'm sure from your perspective, that was probably frustrating to shift into hybrid because that's something that you just like doing and to get the unsolicited advice and to recognize, first of all, that a lot of people who give that, it's projection of
Yeah,
like they only associate cardio with wanting to lose weight. So it's like if you go from somebody who wants to lift to run to certain people, they're going to interpret that as like, oh, so now you just want to like lose weight.
yeah,
And I think for me, any kind of change within anything of like, oh, I want to be a this, I want is that we are multifaceted people. You can
yeah,
lift and run. You can be healthy and drink. You
yeah,
can, lose weight and eat pie. Like it's not
yeah.
one or the other. Like certain habits don't cancel each other out. And I feel like that's so trying to showcase that to other people can create a lot of unsolicited advice. But if anything, I think it's still important to share. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective too, because that's what gets people to realize that we can be both, and
Yeah.
like you don't know that unless you're shown it kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So talking about, I was kind of saying how I'm hybrid. How are you training right now? Like, what's your split look like? Do you have like kind of a program you follow, or what do you do?
Totally. So my whole fitness journey, I did like a push pull legs kind of moment. Just very basic for those who maybe aren't unfamiliar. Just like a leg day. I would usually do a glute day, a push day where you're pushing the weights like chest, shoulders, triceps, pull day with back and biceps, and like a quad day kind of thing. I did that honestly for like pretty much my whole fitness journey with some small variants in between there, but pretty much the same thing. I'm really big on like structure and routine in that way. Recently, I have changed it a little bit to I really only resistance train with my legs right now. Is this a
Yeah.
basic answer? I don't know, maybe. But
Yeah.
I do like 2 leg days a week, really focusing on high intensity training and giving it my all with that. I have one spin class, and then those other 2 days are like cardio and abs, where I'll do just like some stairs and abs. If I do upper body, it's very, very more to exercise the discipline kind of thing. I'm very pleased with my growth in my upper body. This is not at all to imply that you get bulky by training upper body because you don't.
Yeah,
Don't
no,
even
but
get
I
me.
love that you're talking about this. Like, you're satisfied with where you're at, and that's like okay. And I feel like
Yeah,
people don't like to hear that, or it's like hard for people to like understand, but like that's okay to be satisfied with where you're at. Like, you don't have to continue to keep training. Like, that's where I was for a while. Like, I build muscle quite quickly, and I was like, okay, my upper body's as built as I want it to be personally. And people were like, yeah, it's just hard to be on social media. Everyone always has
totally.
something to say and stuff. So I'm glad that you said that.
Of course. And I think when you're in a sort of, I don't want to say a society, that makes it sound so much deeper, that's built around constantly outperforming yourself, it's a very not rare, but it's looked at differently when you are satisfied. Because it's like, well, what do you mean? It's always like be 1% better. And I think that being 1% better for yourself can look a lot different. It can look different in a bunch of different ways. The gym is great and gorgeous, but that should be like 2% in your day. How you treat yourself and live your life outside of that can make or break if you even see any progress. You know what I mean? So for
Yeah.
me, I'm pleased with my upper body strength. That doesn't mean it also took me what, like 3 years of really intense training to grow that. So like you don't just accidentally
No,
like
it doesn't
do a
just happen.
curl and you
Yeah.
just like get a bicep vein. Like it takes a lot of hard work, but I think that that's kind of the beauty of it is like just committing to one thing, seeing how you adapt to it, and knowing that you are the person who can always make adjustments and finding your pivot point. And like, there's no rule of like, if I start running, I need to be a runner for the rest of my life. That's not true.
Right.
You can literally change whenever you want.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I'm saying too. Like with my running journey, I'm like, I'm running now, but like I'm probably gonna get sick of it at some point. Like I've been running for like a year and a half now, and like it's not as fun as it really was at the beginning. I have a race coming up, and I'm like, maybe after that I'll get into I actually want to get into spin. So it's funny you said that. But like one of my
Yeah,
had me go to spin class and my
I
brother's
love
spin.
spin.
And I'm like, I used to go like once a week at my gym and it was so fun. So I'm like,
Mhm.
I think it's fun to like switch it up and change it up. There's like no one perfect like split, no one perfect like recipe for the gym.
Totally.
And I think, yeah, change and variety is like so good and healthy for our bodies too. Um,
Absolutely.
so I'm curious. So you're big on like habits and routine, and so am I.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
curious, what have you like, what are your non-negotiables? What are habits and things that really help you, and that you really couldn't live without? What are habits that have made like a lot of impact in your life?
Totally. Well, number one, I think a lot of them are kind of new. I just love learning
Mhm.
about, like, I listen to the Huberman Lab podcast because he's very like neurosciencey, and that's where I've gotten a lot of like ideas for certain things that I've learned that I adapt really well to. So I think the biggest one has been morning sunlight for me.
Yeah.
I it's not I used to treat it as like my morning sunlight is when I get all my steps in throughout the day. Like I have to do that. But it's literally just like 15 minutes of just being outside, getting some sunlight. It's really great for your circadian rhythm. It's good for your mood. And also, it's just getting the hell outside. Like you are so negative when you first wake up because you're tired, like hello. So just getting outside, getting some sunlight, getting outside of my own moment and just being in something else. Like it sounds very like nature but truly being out in it and looking around and seeing how even if I have the most stressful day planned, like the trees are still swaying in the wind, they don't care. Like even if they feel bad about themselves, they're still treeing. Like you know what I mean? It puts things in perspective and it
Really.
really helps me just kind of channel through my thoughts. So morning sunlight's a huge one for me. Not even like paired with a walk. I mean, sometimes it can be. The less pressure you put on things, the easier they feel to do. So sometimes I'll go out for my 15 minutes of like morning sun and then I will get all my steps, but that's not like why I go kind of thing. Um, I think morning sunlight, definitely journaling or like checklist, some kind of writing down. I'm a big English girl. I love like literature and like just writing. I think if I had to pick like a little hobby thing, I would love to be like an author. I don't know what the hell I would write
I
about.
could see you writing books because like
I
I can
don't know
like
what I'd write
listen
about.
to you forever. Like you're so good at
Oh,
speaking
thanks.
that if you like writing, I'm like you should write a book one day. I think
It
you
would literally be like never, it would be Moby Dick. It would never end, literally. But yeah, so I love journaling and making checklists keeps me very organized, especially when you have a lot of like responsibilities. If I don't have some kind of plan, I fear I may lose my mind. So that, and then I think just like positive affirmations. I have an app called I Am on my phone
that.
and it's I have like the widgets for it. So when I open my phone, like I get little affirmations of like I am strong and also like I am grateful or whatever. And I'm really big on that just because it's really helpful to have that kind of validation. And it's really cute. And I do get some questions asking like what that how I get ideas for like affirmations, and it's literally through that app. And I'm really big on that. And then I think just stretching has been my most recent one. I used to neglect stretching a lot because I didn't think it really mattered, but it's not necessarily what it does for you in terms of like hypertrophy. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
your life is not if you gain muscle or not. Like that it's really a lot deeper than that. It's more just time at the end of my day. I like to just stretch before bed and really connect with my body and like be I'm really big on gratitude and being grateful for, you know, my legs for carrying me throughout the day and like my feet for walking me to this. And like, even if I had the worst day ever, my body still showed up for me no matter what. And like, stretching has been a really cool way for me to connect with myself.
Like
Does it
that.
make the biggest difference, like physically? I mean, I don't really know the answer to that. It can definitely help with like agility.
Yeah.
But in terms of like mental, I think stretching has been huge. And then I think just steps in terms of impact, steps have had the biggest impact on like my physique, if you will, just because it's very low impact time that I've really enjoyed. It helps with digestion, a bunch of things. But I also try to refrain from like looking at things as like this is my favorite thing, because what I like to do is like I put pressure on that to always be
Yeah.
like my life forever, and it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be that way. But I think just overall looking or seeking different ways to work alongside myself and understand that like they don't need to always serve me, but if they do now, that's great too, you know, like taking the pressure off. Because when I would go on my morning walks and be like this has to be an hour and a half because an hour and a half is exactly 10,000 steps,
Mm.
minute one hi it's going to feel like hell,
Yeah.
you know? So the less pressure, it's been really helpful. So that's kind of the main. What are some for you?
Mine are a daily walk. Like I love just getting
Yes.
outside, kind of like you said. Like when you were talking, I was like, yep, yep. Like it just being
Yes.
out. You can't be like in a bad mood on a walk. Like I'm always
Really.
so calm, so relaxed. I have my best thoughts, or if I'm with a friend, like best conversations are outside on a walk. I have my phone and sometimes I edit. Sometimes like I'll
Mm.
habit stack and I'll edit while I'm
Mhm.
walking, but most of the time I just like to put it away. I'll even put in my AirPods and not listen to anything and just like be in my own little world and just
Yeah.
I pray a lot on my walks. I like brainstorm for ideas. Like literally my best stuff comes from my walks and I love it. My other
Totally.
one is what are other ones that I do? I'm a like you said, big to-do list girl. Like I have to be
Yep.
organized. Like
Mhm.
I used to be so specific and be like hour to hour. Sometimes it's just, what I need to get done, but
Yeah.
that keeps me like sane and it keeps me, I don't know, organized, especially with the work that I do. I don't have someone telling me like I don't have a structured day. So it's like a way
Right.
for me to make structure and then I can kind of shut it off once I get through my like
Absolutely.
I could keep working all day and then feel guilty if I'm not. And that was a struggle I had at the beginning. I was
Totally.
25/8. Like I was always working out, turn down like hangouts or dinners with friends because I'm like, no, I need to edit, I need to get this done. And so
Mm-hmm.
just giving myself more grace on that. And like, I love the no pressure thing. Like, that's going to be my new like reminder because I
Yeah.
put pressure on myself because you remind me a lot of myself in the way like we're very like hardworking. We're, you know, like we're going to do what we have to do. We have that like boss girl like mindset and like that
Yeah.
like push through, but it's like take the pressure off. It's like okay to give yourself grace. And another
Totally.
habit that I've gotten into, I'm actually curious, have you ever like cycle sync? Do you ever like sync your training or anything to your cycle?
You know, as you say that, I'm literally looking. Are you wearing an Oura ring right now?
I am, yes. It's so helpful because I like
Don't tell me that. It's so expensive.
I know, but it is like because I just recently got off birth control and so I've been like
Yeah.
trying to fix my hormones and like figure them out because my PMS was like so off.
Mm.
And so it has helped me like mentally because I'll be like the week before my period, like I'm a different person.
Oh
Like
yeah, luteal. Isn't that luteal?
yes, your luteal phase,
Yep.
it's like
Hell.
for me, it's
Hellscape.
awful. Like it's so awful. I'm like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm like sad. I'm really emotional. Since getting off birth control, I've noticed like I'm a lot more emotional. Like I literally think in the 4 or 5 years I had birth control, or like I had the IUD, I maybe cried like 10 times. I'm not kidding. Like I was
Oh my
known to
God.
not be an emotional person and I didn't know why.
Mm.
I got off of it and now I'm like crying all the time and I'm like, okay, this is healthy. Like I used to have a bad perspective with that. And so
Really?
I think the aura ring just helps me understand like why I'm feeling the ways I am. And it's
Yeah.
comforting to know like, okay, one, this is temporary because like literally yesterday I started my period and I woke
Hmm.
up like a new person. I was like, thank God. I'm like, I like have energy again. I want to like socialize again. Like I like
Yeah.
literally am a different person. So being able to track it, like it takes your temperature and it's so like everything makes so much sense. Like my temperature literally dropped. Like it's always hot.
That's one thing that I have. I don't have an Oura ring, but I have been taking my temperature first thing in the morning because I've. It's very interesting. We're like eggs. Like we literally heat up
It's so weird.
before. Like
Yeah.
it's so bizarre. I don't. I'm gonna be honest. In terms of like what I've done so far, I've never changed my training based on my. I just give it all that I can, and I have the understanding that all that I can might look like way
Okay.
less,
Absolutely.
right? But like
Yep.
still giving what you can and giving yourself grace, whatever. But I think it would be helpful in terms of like, okay, I don't have energy, but that's not because I'm a bad person. I'm
Yes.
weak, and like
Yeah.
David Goggins is gonna like bark at me. Like it's literally because you're bleeding, girl. You know what I mean? Like
No,
it
for
trying.
real.
I think
Yes.
it would be helpful. I'm just personally not educated enough on it, but I'm curious if you've noticed like that it's helped you.
It's helped me just in that exact reason of being like, okay, like I can give myself grace and it just helps me like take pressure off myself. So
Yeah.
honestly, like the biggest thing I look at is my temperature
Mm.
based on and like it connects to natural cycles. So if like you're not on birth control, you can use natural cycles and it will tell you like more specific details, which I do
Mm.
like. But honestly, to start, like there's not much more benefit other than your sleep. So I like the temperature aspect because I'm like, that's how I know. Like when my temperature
Right.
spikes, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be moody, I'm gonna be emotional, I'm gonna be tired. So give myself grace in the gym. Like you said, give 100% of what I have. But like if this week my training isn't as intense as last week, like it's okay. You're a female.
Okay.
Like it's
Yeah,
what's happening. It can't really control it. Um,
totally.
and so that's the best part about it for sure. I do like the sleep, but I feel like there's other ways to track your sleep. It kind of shows
Mm.
your deep sleep, your light sleep, all of that. And it can like
Yeah,
to go to bed. So there's definitely a lot of like wellness benefits to it. But
I love that so much.
yeah, I hormones is just it's still so new to me too. Like there's so much to
Mm.
learn, but just having that like relief with myself, knowing like, okay, this is why you're feeling this way and it's okay, rather than being like, why is this run feel like so
Yeah,
like I'm not kidding. When I'm in my luteal phase, running is 2 times harder. Like I feel
I
like
believe
I'm
it.
on my feet. I'm like, why am I driving?
Living is so much harder in your luteal
It is.
phase. Like,
It is. And so I'm like, and honestly, it helps with my relationships too. Like with my family,
mm,
friends, my boyfriend, I'm like, okay, like I'm sorry, like just don't test me this week. Like if I'm like acting irrational, I'm like, okay, this is why. Like it makes
totally.
sense. So it's definitely helpful. But
Totally. And I'm recognizing with that, I think some of the reason that I've struggled with getting into that is because a lot of the content that I consume is very like tough love, like
yeah.
get your shit done regardless of how you feel, like F your feelings, like whatever. which I do embody when I,
Yeah.
try to lift, and I do kind of like to preach that, but I also think that, at least for my content, what I aim for, I don't know if it's received this way, I feel like a tough love approach with yourself only works if you genuinely feel like that person has your best interest at heart. Like, if
Yeah.
somebody that you don't know is yelling at you and telling you that you're like a weak piece of shit, like, I'm not gonna get encouraged by that.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
when you give yourself grace, but still have that understanding that you deserve to move and like you
Yeah.
deserve to give it your all, but knowing that it's okay if it's not what it was last week. Like, I feel like that just helps people stay a lot more consistent long
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
And like that's how that kind of things work. So I'm curious to get into it. I literally, dude, I had the Oura ring in my damn cart yesterday, and I was like,
We're
oh,
crying back. It's
I
cheaper, I
can't. Like, I just
know.
can't. Like, I
Yeah.
really struggle spending money, and it's just like, I
Yeah,
can't, but I want
it is a
to.
lot. Honestly, what I would say, well, it is on sale right now. So maybe
Okay.
think about it, but like the temperature thing, like that is like the best way to base it because the day your temperature drops again, like you're gonna start your cycle and you're gonna start feeling better. So
Mm,
like honestly, maybe save the money and do that for a while. And then if you think you want
true.
to get more into it, then bite the bullet. But
Smart.
it's so funny though, because I'm the same way as you with the mindset of like, I go so David Goggins. I'm like, you know what, get up at 4:30. Like this morning I had to get up and run. And it was like, that's just what I had to do. But it's like last week, did I do that? No. Because I was like, okay, like it's just for me, if I can't like get full benefit from it, it's like, why stir up all this stress and like
Yeah.
drain my body when I could do something else that's more beneficial? Because I know it's not going to be like the run would have been terrible. So definitely been a good way for me to like give myself more grace in that because it's like 1 week I'm like, okay, I'm gonna listen to my body, and if it's this way, it's this way. But then the other 3 weeks I'm like, okay, don't be a baby, like push yourself, like you have more in there.
Please.
It's mental, like just push through it. So I like
And
that.
I think that like listening to your body, people struggle with that because it's like, well, my body's telling me
Yeah,
that I should just lay in bed all day. And it's like, okay, like absolutely. I think for me, it's having the understanding that sometimes it does take certain periods of being really rigid with
yeah,
yourself to learn routine and to like familiarize yourself with consistency. And then from there, just having that foundation of, okay, I'm still going to do XYZ for myself. If I don't feel the best, that's okay. Like I'm allowed to feel that way sort of thing, but still showing up for myself because I just know that it's what I deserve versus a
yeah,
lot of content, not at all to like call anybody out or anything, but a lot of content is very shame focused of like, I am, a bad person or I get up fatty, like we got to run. And it's like,
yeah,
if that works for you, absolutely, that is great. I don't think that that deserves necessarily a voice in a society that's already very
I
formulated around certain things like that. To each their own. I mean, I judge things I don't understand and I don't
yeah,
understand that. But I think that if you can do it from a place of love, it really just takes you so much more, like you had mentioned earlier with that longevity piece, where it's like, I just know that I deserve to move today. If that just means yoga, that's okay. I still moved. I still checked the general box, and that's what matters. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Exactly. I always say like when I stay disciplined or like to a routine, that's how I create the best version of myself. And I'm like the
Mhm.
happiest and healthiest that I can give the most in my work, into my relationships. And so that's what I keep in mind. And so like that's my focus for the day is like, okay, like am I being like it's out of love because it's like I want to show up as
Totally.
the best version of me, but I understand like I I obtain that differently every single day. So I feel like you have to be very, very self-aware to like get to like
Hmm.
in tune with yourself, like in tune with your body and your thoughts and your emotions. Cause like you said, some days it's like, oh, listen, or like be mindful, listen to your body, but like sometimes it's an excuse, but sometimes it's legit and you have to learn how to, you know, decipher between the two. And that's hard.
Totally.
I think that just takes time and that just takes like actually slowing down and like I always say like slow down and be quiet with yourself and like you
Agreed.
will begin to learn that because I feel like too in like our society we are such in like a hustle society. We're not very patient. Everything's like go go go. We're never just quiet. Like we always are on our phones or we always have something playing in our ears and
Hmm.
it's like give yourself 5 minutes a day. And that's actually another habit that I do is like I like doing it on my walks because I give myself like 5 minutes to just talk to myself and just be in tune with
Mm,
myself. And it's helped me like learn about myself, learn
absolutely.
new. And I just think that's like the biggest, I don't not hack, but like, I don't know, the most beneficial piece
It's
of
very helpful.
wellness is like just learning to like understand your body and yourself, but it's a process and it's a journey, like your fitness journey in the gym. Like it's gonna take time, but like, oh my gosh, it like changed my life just being able to like have that conversation with myself and really, when you need tough love or when you just need like,
Right.
yeah,
And I think a lot of that comes from first of all, like you had mentioned with like that 5 minutes moment, I think there's lots of different types of rest, and having sensory rest of just no music, no media is very important. I kind of, again, with the walks, I think bleeds into that because I kind of treat my walks like physical journaling, where it's
Mhm.
like you're literally just taking your time. Obviously, you're not like writing down with like a,
Like,
like a, what is it? I always say that not Quinn, pen and quill. What is it? Feather with
oh,
the ink.
yes. I don't know what it's called, but I know what you're
Quill?
talking about. I have no
I
idea.
always try to say that and I mess it up literally every time, but it's not like you're actually writing anything down, but you're just physically giving yourself time with yourself, which I think is really, really important. And I think that we lack that a lot. And I think that's the only way that you know what you're even feeling. Because a lot of
Exactly.
people, it's like, and I don't mean to say a lot of people to sound like I'm any better than anybody else or that I'm like higher up and you to like listen to me or anything, but I think commonly we see all these things that we need to be doing all the time. And it's like, you use media consumption as a coping mechanism because if you're constantly doing something, constantly looking at a video, listening to music, you don't have to deal with your thoughts. It's a
Yes.
great way to be avoidant. Oh, period.
Yeah.
But so much of life is learning what it is that you need, and you don't know that unless you give yourself those moments. You know what I mean? I think a lot of, even like you had said with, okay, well, I know I don't feel like going on a run, but at least I'll like go and do yoga or something like that. I think I've learned this in therapy. It's asking yourself, so what? And having the understanding, if you can't get what you need to done, so what? It's
Yeah.
okay. If I don't, get my editing done, so what? That has nothing to do on who I am as a person. If I eat the cupcake, so what?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so I went off diet. Okay, so what? And literally asking yourself that question to the grave. Truly, I ask it all the time where I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be late to my whatever. Okay, so what? And it's
Yeah.
realizing how much of it is like intrinsic of, oh, well, then I'm a bad person. No,
Yeah.
you're not.
Right?
And then you can associate, you can realize and learn what it is that you're actually looking for out of those things, which I
Yeah.
think it plays a huge role in terms of like gym and fitness and food, where
Mhm.
it's like, I can't go off my diet. And it's like, it's not about the diet, is it? It's about you feel like fundamentally you need to be following a certain rule or you're a bad person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is like, it's just such a deeper thing. And like you had mentioned, having those moments to sit and literally ask yourself questions is the only way to get there. And I feel like that's so underrated in
Mhm.
terms of, and it's free. Thank God. Like in this
Literally.
economy,
Literally.
just sit down. Like, yay. You know what I mean? It's great.
I love that. No, and it literally ties right back to how what we kind of started off saying is how psychological everything is.
Yep.
You just have to take the time and just chat with yourself and ask yourself those questions and really think on it. Like I always say, reflect. I'm like, reflect
Mm-hmm.
on decisions, reflect on your feelings. Like you make a decision, why are you feeling this way? Well, it's stemming from something else. So like how can we heal that? How can we fix that? And it's a constant cycle.
Absolutely. It's a loop.
But
Yeah, totally.
anyway, to kind of wrap this up, do you have like a favorite quote that you like love, live by, kind of revert to in times of
So I hope you know how much this question is like impossible for me to answer because I make quotes, girl. I
No,
have
I
it
am
like
too. That's
in
why
my
I ask it. So I'm sure I would know what
That's
you're
a good question to ask. I will say, so in terms of like my own quotes that I've like come up with,
Yeah.
the one that stuck with me the most, it's one that I've shared. It's like, I kind of put it on my social media. It's things do not owe you ease. I don't even know how I came around thinking of that up, but I remember during that period, especially where I was just challenging myself all the time, like with the gym, with the diet, with my mental health. Like I was just going through a lot of hard shit. And it was this like, oh my God, this is so difficult. And I kind of just had a realization one day. I was like, it's allowed to be. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's almost, I don't want to say it's privileged, but it's a weird thing to expect things to be given to you easily. That's not where you grow.
Right.
So, when I'm hip thrusting, when I'm leg pressing, when I don't want to drink my water, but I'm doing it anyway, it's that understanding, like, you know what, this is really hard, but it's allowed to be. Things don't owe me ease.
I love
I don't
that.
have any position to expect things to be given to me. Like, we're all the same in that way.
Mhm.
So that's one I think from that I like came up. I don't know if I came up with that, but I think I did. I've
I've
had
never
it,
heard it. I love it.
yay,
Well, came
okay,
up with
I
it.
trademark it.
Yeah.
That one, and then in terms of just general ones, the only other one that I really has resonated with me is unnecessary suffering is not strength. And that one's personal to me because especially given, times where I was really strict with things, you think that if things are more painful or if you go the harder route that you'll reap more rewards or that you'll get more from it or it'll be better. And and I've learned in contrast to myself where like this past summer, I have made a lot of fitness progress and I look very, not that it matters, but I replicate a similar kind of physique, I think, to how I did when I was very, very strict, but I've been so much more inclusive. And that contrast has made me realize that like just because you can take things doesn't mean you have to. And like learning how to still work alongside yourself and get where you need to be without suffering, because the point is not to suffer. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I thought that it was, and I
Yeah.
never had moments in the past where I was checking in and like actually thinking if I was enjoying what I was doing. Versus now I've been able to make similar or whatever progress through actually like living a full life where it's like, because we do these things like lifting and eating well and whatever to prolong healthy lives. I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the many, many, many reasons. And so I think it's really important to make sure that in your day to day life, while things can be challenging, that you're not suffering, because
Yeah.
why are we prolonging something that you're
Right.
not enjoying? You know what
Right.
I mean?
Absolutely. No, and it makes me so happy to hear you've been able to find that balance, and like
Totally.
that perfect, happy middle ground. Like that's the goal for everyone is to like feel great in your body, have those results that you desire in a healthy, balanced, like enjoying, like fulfilling way, like you're able to enjoy life and enjoy the gym and enjoy your physique. Like that's amazing. And I'm so glad that you found that.
Thanks. I really, and that's half the reason I share to my experiences. I don't want other people to go through periods of such rigidity to
Yeah.
know that that isn't what you need to do.
Yeah.
Where like I can learn from my experience and say, listen, I've been down the dark path or whatever, like weird
Yeah.
Edgar Allan
Yeah.
Poe moment you want to say. Like I've been down there. And
Yeah.
yeah, I saw results. I wasn't living life. I was literally a shell of a person. And
Yeah.
it's like, but see, I'm still able to get to where I want to be. I'm still able to be content, and
Yeah.
I've been adding, it's been like an addition to an already full life kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's a perspective that I think is, I like to hope is valuable to other people. And so that's kind of why I share what I do. So I appreciate you saying that's seen, because it means a lot to me.
It is. It absolutely is. You're doing amazing stuff on social media.
Thanks.
I'm so happy for you and I'm so proud of you. To end this, do you want to like plug yourself so people know where to follow
Oh,
you and find you? Because all
ew, I hate that, but
content.
sure. Yeah, so for my TikTok and for my Instagram, I'm Fueled by Fitness. That's kind of my business name. So like I'm an online personal coach is where I like coach a bunch of people, and that is also like kind of the name of my business. It's Fueled by Fitness. My icon is a sweet potato. Like that's kind of
I
my
love it.
moment. I'm a big sweet potato girl. And my YouTube is just Haley Cordova. Honestly, if you just look up Haley Cordova, like that's where a lot of my social stuff is. And then my podcast is Haliness with the Y in parentheses. On Spotify and on Apple. So
Love
that's,
it.
if you'd like to,
Go
that's, I
follow, go
appreciate you
listen.
saying
Your
that.
podcast is so good. I've been like
Thanks.
listening all week.
Oh, I appreciate that. I
But
pour a lot into it. So I appreciate that a lot.
anyway, thank you so much for coming on. This was an amazing conversation. You're so insightful and definitely you helped so many people in this episode.
I
So
really
a pleasure
appreciate
having
you.
you on. I appreciate
Yes. Thanks so much. I really
it.
appreciate the
Thank
opportunity. It
you.
means
Of
more to me
course.
than you could know.